Okay, we are working on the practice Math HiSet Test, FPT 7, and we're on question number 4. This question has appeared on just about every one of the HiSet tests that I have looked at, all the practice tests that I've looked at, and this one has, the students have to have a certain amount of knowledge to be able to answer this question. First of all, they're going to see graphs, and I've drawn these little green lines on it already, but the original problem looks like this. It does not have any lines on it. It just has this one quadrant. And what students need to understand is they need to understand that anytime they're dealing with a graph at all, that it's going to have x and y coordinates, and that each one of these quadrants is going to mean something else, okay? And they need to be able to understand the basics of how graphing works. They need to understand that this is the point of origin, or the 0 point, and that what is happening with anything that they're graphing is they're going out a certain number and up a certain number, or they're going out this way and up this way, okay? So the students need to understand that the x's go left to right, and the y's go up and down. And that is what gives us, sorry my arrows don't look great, that is what gives us x and y coordinates. If the students don't have that concept, they're going to be completely lost when it comes to answering any question concerning graphing. Graphs also have lines on them. You'll see graph paper that have the lines going all the way up and down. I am not doing that for this because I can't draw my lines very well on this particular whiteboard. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of an example of what happens with these lines and what happens with x's and y's, okay? So each one of these lines represents a number. This is the 1, the 2, the 3, the 4, the 5. This is -1, -2, -3, -4. These are also negative, and these are positive. So anything that's in this quadrant right here, the x and the y are both positive. Anything that appears in this quadrant right here, what's happening is the x is going out in a positive manner, but the y is going down, so the y's are negative. Over here in this quadrant, the x is going backwards. This first number here is a -1. So it's going into the negatives. So the x is negative, but the y is also negative because this number, this line right here, is a -1 as well. This one is a -2. This one is a -3, and so on and so on. Okay? So you'll see that anything over here is going to be, I apologize for how awful this looks, but these are all going to be negatives, okay? Anything that appears over here is going to have a -x and a positive y because these y's are positive numbers, 1, 2, 3, 4, okay? So a -x and a positive y. Now what I mean by anything is that there are going to be dots. Each dot represents a point in this coordinate graph. And to be able to put a dot anywhere in here, you need to have 2 numbers. I explain this by saying it's kind of like a map. If I want to go from, well, let's not say the from part. If I wanted to go to Alexandria, I can't just say, where's Alexandria on the map? How do I get there? I have to know where I'm going from. I need to know where my point of origin is. And that is going to have a coordinate. If you've ever used a GPS, if you've ever used Google Maps, they use coordinates to find different things. In fact, let's look. I cannot type today. Let's look at Google Maps, and what I want to look at real quickly is, okay, this is Northwestern State University. If I wanted to find a point, this is me right here. If I wanted to tell you where I was on the map, and if I wanted to use this X and Y coordinate, I would be giving you a certain amount of spaces you would have to move left to right, and a certain amount that you would have to move up and down to be able to find me, okay? That is just the way maps work. All maps are based on a grid, and you'll see when it doesn't quite load, let me do this really fast. When it's not quite loaded all the way, you'll notice that you can see the grid back there behind it. So all of this stuff right here is how they build their grids, okay? And they have X and Y coordinates that help you find where it is that you're going. So that is pretty much the same thing as what we're dealing with whenever we're dealing with coordinates on what's called a coordinate plane, okay? Now, if I wanted to find out what this dot right here, what its coordinates were, I would go over 3 and I would go up 3 because that's where the dot is. So my coordinates for this particular dot would be 3 and 3 because I went over 3, which was my X, and I went up 3, which was my Y. Now if I wanted to find this dot right here, I went a different direction. I went over -4 and I went down 3, 4, looks like I'm in about a 5 there. So my answer here would be -4 and -5. Those would be my coordinates. Now if I wanted to combine these two dots, let's say this is Natchitoches and this is Alexandria, and I wanted to draw a line between the two of them, I would connect them, and that's supposed to be a straight line, but it is not. I would connect those two, and it would show me a pattern, and every dot that appeared on this line would be part of the coordinates to help me get to where I'm going, okay? And there's a lot more to talk about with graphs and with coordinate planes. There is the slope of a line, which has to do with how steep it is, whether it goes this way or whether it goes this way, or whether it's like this, or maybe the line is going to be straight up or it's going to be straight to the side. So there are a lot of different things that are happening within the coordinate plane, but for right now, students just need to understand what the coordinate plane is. Now back to our question. The question is, which of the following graphs represents the relationship between X and Y if Y always increases as X increases? What that means is that if I have a point that starts on the 1 and it starts on the 1, 0, which is where I am right here, X has to increase as Y increases. Does that make sense? Are you seeing this pattern here? Excuse me from going straight through this. But each one of these dots right here represents the fact that my X was at a 1, my Y was at a 0. Now my X is at a 2, my Y is at a 1. My X is at a 3, my Y is at a 2. They are both increasing at the same time. Now if you notice, one of these should stand right out because it looks exactly like what I just dotted out right here. If I am on the 6 for the x, then I'm up here on the 4 for the y. If I'm on the 5 for the x, I'm on about a 3.5 for the y. So they're increasing at the same rate, okay? The y increases as the x increases. So 1 is definitely going to be one of our answers, okay? So I am going to circle this because yes, that one works, okay? Now, if I look at my answers here, I've got A, B, D, and E. So I can't really guess because the Roman numeral 1 appears in 4 different answers. So I know that this is not my answer. Now that does not eliminate 3 and 4. It's just saying that 3 and 4 only are not the answer. Okay, so let's see what happens with these other graphs and what happens to them as we're going along. Okay, with this particular graph here, what we're going to do is we're going to look at the first dot. All right, the first dot on this one, let me get us a clear board over here. The first dot on this one, okay, it's drawn kind of like this, okay? It's not exact, but it's pretty close. So let me draw this out a little bit. Okay, this is my y, this is my x. If I'm on the 1 here, I'm on about the 5 here, okay? So that's a 1, 5. Now, if I go to this point right here, I'm on a 5, 4. Okay. If I go to this dot right here, I'm on a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This would be about a 6, 1. So what's happening is my y is the second number. What is it doing? It's decreasing 5, 4, 1 as my x is increasing 1, 5, 6. So to go back to the question, 2 is not going to be one of our possibilities. So E is no longer a possible answer. Okay? Now what we have to look at is these other two. What's happening with this one right here with number 3 is that these first few lines here, these first few dots are perfectly straight. Okay? There is no increase taking place there. So the y on these is going to stay at, this should actually be at the 1. So your x is going to be 1, the y is going to be 1. So it would be 1, 1, 2, 1, 3, 1, 4, 1, 5, 1. Then we have an increase here where we go to 6, 2. Okay? Then we would have an increase right here of 7, 3. Okay? So the increase is taking place, but it's not taking place always. Okay? That is our key word. In the first few dots, there's not an increase. So this means that any answer with 3 in it is not the correct answer. So this leaves us with this one. And if you'll notice, there is a slight increase in the y. It's slightly bent, and when you go here, it also is slightly bent. So my x is at about a 1, my y is about a 1. The x is at about a 2, the y is about a 1.5. Then we've got a 3 for the x and a 2 for the y. So this shows the increase as well. So the only one that can possibly be the answer is A, because both 1 and 4 only show that x and y are always increasing together.